Welcome to HMBA 614, Health Services Management. I'm your professor, Professor Roberts, and we're entering week 6. So we have a lot that we can do here. And yeah, there we go. Oh, too far. Okay. All right, week 6, our agenda. So we're going to review some of the reading. So we're going to talk about chapters 12, 13, and 14, and then we're going to talk about Project Portfolio 2. There's a lot to do during this part of the portfolio, so we'll spend a little bit more time on that. So, chapter 12, the first reading for it. So, the role of the project manager. The project manager is basically like the circus leader. They're making sure everything is happening as it's supposed to, but it's kind of like controlled chaos most of the time. Yes, you do have those great days where everything is working perfectly, but don't always expect that. There's so much that's going on usually that you feel overwhelmed sometimes. But if you're one of those people that thrives under pressure and having deadlines that need to be done and so on and so forth, project management might be for you. So definitely take a look. There's lots of opportunities out there where you could lead a project but just maybe not have the title of project manager. So it is a big step when you actually become a project manager because there's so much responsibility that you're taking on. But you know, it takes it doesn't really take a whole lot of preparation. I mean, you don't need a certification, you don't need special training. You just need really to know what you're doing. Now, yes, the education and the training definitely help, but you know, think about all the stuff that's been done throughout history, and there's, you know, they never had, let's say, the title of project manager, but they got things done. But it is what it is. You know, having the title project manager has a lot of thought behind it, and the person who is one has a lot of responsibility. So their roles and responsibility. You know, the first thing is communication. I know I've mentioned it before, but a project manager is communicating, let's say 70 to 80% of the time, maybe even higher than that. They're in meetings, they're on the phone, they're sending emails, they're using Slack, or they're using Microsoft Teams. They're using all sorts of forms of communication to make sure that they have what they need, let's say, for the next day or the next week of the project, or they're trying to resolve or put out fires. There's always communication going on. The next thing is planning. You know, some people love developing a plan and then executing a plan. And that's great because that's the type of people we need. But when it comes to managing the people, that's, you know, it's where it gets a little bit tougher for those that would say love to just do the planning. But of course, there's more communication. There's so much communication. I'm hoping you guys are getting the drift here. Estimation. You know, when you're starting a project, we did the work breakdown structure, and we tried to estimate a budget off of that. So we estimated how much each part of the activities within the project would take. Now, some groups, based on your first submission, went as far as to actually go down to having certain cables for computers in the in a new facility. You know, the Category 6 cables or Cat 5 cables. They're, you know, that might be a little too detailed, but that level of detail has eliminated problems from arising. So they know exactly what's needed, and therefore someone can go ahead and order it, like your procurement person. They know exactly what's needed, and it's not a guess later at how much is needed, and you don't run into the problem of ordering too little. So while that level of estimation is desirable, it might not be feasible for every project. And of course, there's even more communication. You know, so much. Working with stakeholders, we'll talk about a stakeholder registry in the second part of the project portfolio. there's just so much communication. If you're one of those people that doesn't like to talk to other people, project management might not be for you, but you could still participate with projects. So everybody can work on a project. It's just knowing your strengths and weaknesses. So chapter 13, we talk about motivation, teaming, and the project team. When we think of ourselves, we have to find out what motivates ourselves, so we know ourselves, and what motivates our team. Everybody on our team is going to be motivated by different things. Some people are motivated by a handshake telling them they did a good job. Others might be motivated with a bonus or a monetary award. Money drives them. Others might be motivated by having a Friday off so they can spend more time with their family, or just not being on call for a weekend. There's so many things that can motivate your team. It could be that they get to pick where the team has lunch on Friday or goes out for drinks or whatever your team does to kind of wind down from the week or a major milestone of your project. All these things don't have to cost money is what I'm getting at. Some people are very happy with that, hey, congratulations. But with those type of people, they may want that congratulations in private, where they don't want to stand out from the crowd. Others want to be in that limelight, have their 15 seconds of fame type recognition. So knowing your people and what motivates them is a great way to make sure their morale is high, especially when there's some setbacks in the project. Teams. This is one of the things that you see in every team, regardless of the length of the project. We have these 4 stages. So we have forming, where the team actually comes together. It's established. Person A, B, C, D, and E come together as teammates, or, maybe it's 50 people or 100 people. The team is coming together. They may or may not know each other. Everybody is like, hey, we're here. So, and then the next step here is storming. And this is really where people tend to think that the team is not worthy of being a team. This could be the fact of resistance to the team leader. This could be some disagreements between team members. It takes time to get through this. Every team goes through it, so it's normal. Could be some bickering, could be, hopefully it's not anything like physical violence. That's a whole nother issue that human resources may need to take care of. But after storming, we start to get used to each other and how each other operates and so on and so forth. And that's when we get into this norming phase. We're starting to do that. We're adapting to each other to find a cohesive way where we can operate. And then once we get through that, we find all these standards that our team's going to use, such as a communication method or other type of, let's say, rules or ways or that your team is going to operate. Once everybody accepts that, we move into performing. So the team is actually starting to be high performance. They're working together. They know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and they pick up where someone might be a little slower or maybe not having an easy time doing their task. Another person will jump in there and get it done or help them with it. So now, depending on the reading you do, we'll actually have maybe one more step of closing. This could be, depending on how long your team has been working together, this could be nothing, where everybody just goes their way with a handshake or a, hey, see you later kind of phrasing. Or it could be actually pretty heartfelt that the team has completed what they've been working on, especially if it's been multiple years. And then now they're finished the project and they're going back to their home departments or, their functional areas. So we have the closing. It just doesn't follow the naming scheme here. And this is just as important as all the other stages. It brings closure to the team. Like I said, it could be just a simple handshake, see you next time kind of thing, or it could be actual, people crying because they don't want to break up the team. So, like I said, it's depending on where you read this about teaming, where you'll find out about these 4 standard ones, and sometimes they add a 5th. So we need to get the right people on the team. If you read a book, I believe it's, I think Jack Welch wrote it, Good to Great, I believe it's called. He talks about getting the right people on the bus. And that's what we're doing with the teams. If we're going to be doing some coding, for example, well, you don't want a team full of accountants. If you're going to be talking about an innovative new surgery because of a unique condition somebody has, and they're like the only one out of 100 in the world that have this condition, and you don't want you don't want people from supply talking about surgery. They're not the right people. You may need a person from supply or some medical or some medical campuses call it engineering. You might need somebody from that to locate the equipment that's needed, but they're not the ones that are going to be talking about the surgery. So we want to make sure we get those right people on the team, and make sure we have the right people in case we don't need them from the beginning. Let's say halfway through the project we need to bring somebody in. Well, we got to make sure we get that right person at the right time. It doesn't do anybody any good if you have somebody that's just kind of twiddling their thumbs, or maybe even hindering the team because they don't have the necessary skills until they're needed. And on the other side of that, once you're done with somebody that has those certain skills, let them go. Maybe there's another project that needs a person with their skills. So make sure you get the right people, and sometimes you don't know exactly who the people are. So that's when you try to get a general idea of what the area is. Like, let's say it's finance, human resources, quality assurance, quality control. If you have a general idea, go to the experts and say, hey, this is what I need. Can you help me focus this down or whatnot? And they'll be more than happy to do that. They may have somebody on their team. If they don't, you might have to go the route of a consultant. But be careful with consultants because they are expensive. And so when you get one, you want them to be working and earning the value, or they're earning their their rates that you have to pay them. So the last thing on this is develop your team. If you're going to have a long project, let's say 6 months, just to throw a number at it, if there's some training that you can give individuals on your team, or pay for their training to go and get a certification or whatnot, put that in your budget so you have the ability to do that. This can motivate people and make them more willing to go the extra mile because you've gone the extra mile for them. So don't be afraid to say yes when somebody says, hey, I'd like to go to this training. It's going to be a week long or a couple days or whatnot. I'm sure your project can last without the person for a few days. And when they come back, they have more skills that they can bring to the table. So definitely look into that. Because you never know, that might be the defining factor for your project. Having somebody with those skills, you just didn't realize it. So put a little bit aside for that. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say it's maybe $500 a person, because not everybody's going to want to go to additional training or certification or whatnot. So it's kind of like just putting a buffer there, because maybe you pay for a hotel night or airline or tickets or something like that. So put in that buffer or that budget line when you are making your budget. So it's all about people in this one here. So motivation, teaming, the project team, make sure you get the right people. And everything else will fall in line if you get the right people. They'll go through the forming, storming, norming, and performing regardless. Motivating them, if you get the right people, it's going to be easier to motivate them because they know what they're doing, and you will see what makes them happy. Or you could just go straight out and ask them, hey, if I was to give you a reward for doing excellent work, what kind of reward do you want? They might say, a little bonus, or they might say, buy me lunch. I mean, lunch, you can get away with $10, $15. Hey, that's great, to recognize somebody. Or they might just say, hey, I'd like to go home early on Friday. Cool. All right, so chapter 14, so leadership and power. This one is pretty dynamic, just like the last one with motivating people and teams. So a project manager is also a leader. You need to know how to lead people. And leadership is more about motivation, in my opinion, where management is more about the administrative side of what you have to do, like the paperwork and the performance reviews and all that kind of stuff. So being a leader, you want people to willingly follow you because you have, as it's later in the slide there, power. You have that reference or attraction power. People like you. Or you have experts, knowledge. And that's why people are committed to helping you out. When you ask them, hey, can you do this? If they like you, they'll go ahead and do it for you without any problems. If you're an expert, and they recognize you're an expert in that area, they're going to go with it because they feel perhaps you're not leading them astray. So that next level of power is legitimate or status or reward here. So legitimate or status. This could be, let's say, the president of the university. He has power because he is the president of the university, or he currently occupies that position. So his status as president, it doesn't matter who is in that position has the power. Think about, let's say, you have a, how can I say it here? Let's say a senior doctor. They have a position because, let's say, they're the department head of a medical office or medical clinic. Well, they have legitimate power because of their status. Now, of course, they have expert power. They didn't get that position because they weren't that smart about what they were doing. They don't necessarily need to be liked to do their job. But that legitimate and status power usually get compliance because people don't need to like you to recognize that you have that power. And also, another aspect of this that compliance there is reward. So if you can reward somebody, they'll usually do what you want them to do. Now, it doesn't mean they're enthusiastic to do it. They're doing it to get the reward. Or they're doing it to avoid the potential negative consequences of not doing it. A anti-reward or a punishment, let's say. So, both of those, legitimate status and reward, you usually get compliance. People do it, but it's not like they want to do it. They do it so they don't have to deal with problems later. And then finally, we have the coercive power. This is do it or else. You can think of a dictator. People are resisting doing what you want. Hopefully none of you will end up in this level, but sometimes you have to do it this way because of certain things have to be done. This kind of goes back to the style that you're going to use depending on what kind of power you have. If you're, let's say, a nurse manager, Well, you are a nurse manager. You're in charge, let's say, of the nursing staff of a clinic or an area of the hospital or medical facility. Well, you've been giving that status, so you have legitimate status, but let's say you're using it for not good, let's say evil, and you're threatening people to get people to do what you want. Well, they may do what you want, but they're maybe not putting 100% into it. They might be cutting corners just to get it done to get you off their back, or to avoid the punishment of that person could give, like let's say termination of employment, or extra shift, or something like that, or scheduling issues, or, that kind of stuff. But knowing what kind of a leader you are, there's many books on leadership styles and so on and so forth. If you're not sure, there's a plenty of websites that kind of will ask you questions about how you lead people, and it will tell you what kind of a leader you are. For myself, I am a situational leader. So I will take on different roles depending on what the situation requires. So I might be a coach at one time. I might be the disciplinarian the next. If you're a parent, you know what I'm talking about. But it depends on your occupation and your upbringing, maybe, on how you've developed your leadership style. So definitely learn what you are, and then learn what the people you may be over, what they respond to. Because everybody's going to respond to a leader differently. So just take a look at presidents that we've had the last few years. No one can argue that they weren't a leader, but they can argue about how they led. Regardless of politics, politics are just many blood-sucking creatures. But, how did they do it? One side of our political spectrum will say we're going to do it this way. Another side will say we're going to do it the same thing, but we're going to do it this way. Is one side right and the other side wrong? Perhaps. But they're still trying to get the job done. Hopefully I danced on that political tightrope sufficiently. But let's move into talking about the portfolio. So our portfolio is consisting of five items, I should say. And just a note, when you guys submit to eCampus, you can submit multiple files at the same time. So make sure you do that. If you submit some files or one file at a time, I don't get to see those unless I do some tricky stuff with eCampus to see your previous submissions. So make sure that all your files are submitted at one time. And only one person needs to submit it for the group. All right, so stakeholder register. So when we look at who has a vested interest in our project, it could be the executive leadership, it could be the public, it could be coworkers, it could be the accounting department. We're going to make a list of all these people. That way, we're aware of their interest in our project. And we can communicate with these people when appropriate. Sometimes we're going to tell people certain information, but not others different information. For example, an executive, informing executives, you're probably just going to hit the highlights, but have the details ready in a meeting, where you're talking to directors or department heads, you're probably going to get a little bit more into the details. But when you talk to the general public, you're probably going to just talk the really 30,000 foot view. So as an example, the children's wing on Ruby Memorial, opened a while ago. The public was probably only told when it would be open and the services it would provide. That's all the public really needs to know, right? Now, the children's wing does have like a pediatric emergency room. So Ruby Memorial probably informed all the local ambulance providers of the date when they can start bringing patients to them. And also maybe surrounding medical facilities saying, hey, we have this children's wing, we have an emergency department in it. Make sure that you don't go to the old emergency room or the adult emergency room entrance. That way, seconds can save lives in an emergency situation, but getting the person to the right place so they can receive that care is critical in that type of situation. So you're going to tell the public one thing, you'll tell the, let's say, emergency services another thing, but maybe a little bit more information. I'm hoping you guys kind of understand what I'm talking about. But basically, this is a list of people who we're going to communicate and how we are going to communicate with them. Some people want to be told face-to-face in a meeting. Others want to be told by email. Some might be a press release, and so on and so forth. All right, so that's the stakeholder register. Project schedule. You guys have already made a work breakdown structure. This is the point where you start assigning time for completion for these. So when is certain activities going to happen compared to other activities? Like your first activity might last, let's say, 5 days, as an example. The second activity might start immediately when that first one ends, so there's a relationship there, or a dependence. And so the second one will start directly after that and go for, 10 days. But also there's a third activity that also starts at the end of the first one and goes for 3 days. The schedule helps us build a Gantt chart. So hopefully you guys read the Gantt chart section. If you haven't, go ahead and take another look at it, because the Gantt chart is a great way to visually see where you're at in the project. Sometimes it's called a waterfall chart because it looks like a waterfall. When you look at all the activities, they kind of have a slope down as you go, because you're knocking off things off the top of the list because they started first and you're moving down. But the great thing about a Gantt chart is you can look at a specific date at the top or a time frame at the top of the chart and just go down, and you can see exactly what should be happening during that time. You can see that if an activity is ahead of schedule or behind schedule just by, asking, is activity 7 on schedule? And they can say, well, no, we've had to push the start of that one back 1 day or 1 week. It's very easy to see on a Gantt chart. So go ahead and prepare your schedule. You can use that estimation method on how long things should take. The same estimation method as with the budget. The most likely times 4 plus optimistic plus pessimistic. Divide all that by 6, and that's one estimation method. So, all right. So the RACI matrix. This is responsible, accountable, consult, and inform. That's what the letters stand for. So when you guys look at who's responsible or who's on your project team, you can start assigning who's responsible for certain tasks, who is accountable for certain tasks. Maybe a supervisor is accountable for the task, but they're not actually the one doing it. Then who do you need to consult? Maybe you need to consult with accounting or finance or engineering. And then who do you need to inform? Now, inform is pretty easy. You just tell them what's going on. With this, people that you list or resources you list can have more than one letter. Generally, you might see R and A, responsible and accountable, together, but you might also see responsible and consult, R and C, together. You generally don't see I combined with anything because you're just telling them what's going on. So But as you see fit, go ahead and take your chart of all of the people that would be on your project team, the various resources such as other departments or individuals outside of your project team that would be contributing to your team, and build a matrix. So it's as simple as listing people down let's say the first column, and then have 4 more columns, RACI, and just put, like a check mark or a box next to it, or something to indicate that, let's say Professor Roberts has a check mark in the C, the console. Something as simple as that. That's all this is. All right, so requirements. So we have to figure out what we need to accomplish our activities. This could be people, this could be money, this could be other resources. This is where we actually get down and identify, like I said, what we need. Sometimes we don't figure out everything because we might be unfamiliar with the process. It happens. So we might miss things, but this will also give us the ability to reach out to those people who have the resources and say, hey, in 3 months, I'm going to need this. And they can maybe put a reservation on that item so that when 3 months come, it's yours. This is a great way to identify everything and then line up, making sure you get it. So because people is one of the hardest things to get, especially last minute. But if you let's say you need somebody from procurement. Well, it's difficult to get somebody last minute from procurement because they have a workload they have to get through. But if you talk to let's say your procurement manager and say, hey, I need one person, I need them for 3 months, starting on this date, what can you do for me? And they'll say, oh yeah, I can give you so-and-so. I'll make sure that they're ready to go on that date. Now, of course, follow that up with an email if you did a phone call or a face-to-face. And, send a reminder maybe a little bit ahead of time. So you remind them, because if they're like me, I'm going to forget but I'll remember the conversation. I just forget that it was on the, coming up. So yeah, that's requirements. The risk register. Every project has risk. It's one of those things we just can't get away from. But how we deal with that risk. So this is where we'll identify the risk and we'll say, okay, well, how is this going to affect us? Let's say, we're building the children's wing and rain is a risk because we're pouring the concrete base to make sure the building is structurally sound. Well, the base needs to dry. Well, wet is not conducive to drying, right? So we could look at, okay, if it rains, what do we do? But we also look at it from a couple other perspectives too, like the severity of the risk. So what happens if it was to rain? Is it something where possibly there'll be loss of life, or is it more of, oh, we're just going to push the schedule back one day, or something like that? So the severity. And then we're also going to look at the likelihood of it happening. So it could be, very unlikely, or it can be extremely likely, like almost a certainty. So the more that we're towards that certainty and the severe impact of that risk, we're going to develop plans to deal with these risks if they do happen. So mitigation plans. So rain on the day you're going to pour some concrete for footers for I think it's a 10-story children's wing. That is probably not the end of the world. So I'd say maybe it's a low, moderate risk of severity. But the likelihood of it happening, it depends on the time of year. But when you look at where those two intersect, that might be, let's say, in a yellow zone. It's not a high priority that you come up with a plan, like as the red section, but it's something you need to come up with first before the, let's say, the green low risk that you need to worry about. So we can do this on well, once we have identified the risk, which is what the risk register is, we can go on and do a risk matrix and identify all this stuff, and that will help us get there. But for this, I just want you guys to identify all the risks. And please don't just put a couple words. Actually, maybe put a sentence or two so that shows me that you guys have actually thought of the risk in more than just kind of like off the top of the head kind of thing. Kind of develop that risk a little bit. It doesn't have to be very long, maybe 2 sentences. All right, so that is Project Portfolio Part 2. Real easy. It just takes a little time and takes a little bit of creative thinking and, well, just thinking in general. So I'm very confident that you guys can do everything. I'm enjoying reading your Week 6 discussion posts about the VA rebuilding their facility down in Louisiana. That was a huge undertaking. I remember it happening after Katrina. And there's a lot of things that they talk about in the video that on the website I let you guys see or linked to. There's a lot of things they did that most people wouldn't think of, like putting their IT infrastructure on the second floor. Because if there is flooding, usually IT is in the basement. On most facilities, it's in the basement because it's cooler and it's away from everybody. But being on the second floor, if it floods, well, they're above ground, so they save a lot of money from replacing that equipment because it's on the second floor. But there's a lot of projects. They involved a lot of people in making that facility work for the community, and that's not seen very often. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen, but it's not seen very often. Usually there's some consultant that builds the, or I should say maybe an architect who designs the building, and then a board of directors says, "Oh yeah, we love it," but not enough consideration goes into, the space needed for certain clinics or whatnot. And then, as the clinic grows, they have no room to grow into, so now they're being moved around different places, and it just, it's a problem later. But involving your stakeholders in those focus groups, such as what the Department of Veterans Affairs did for that local community, it's a great example, especially for a healthcare class, about project management and the involving the community, because that facility serves the veteran community of that area. Well, that's enough of me talking. I look forward to seeing your Project 2 and more of your weekly discussion posts. And if there's anything I can do, reach out, because it's great to hear from you guys since we don't see each other in person. So hopefully we'll get through these last couple weeks without a difficulty. It's downhill from here. There is no final exam, so you guys can take a breather. And, I look forward to having you guys come to commencement, or graduation is what most people know it as, and maybe shaking your hands, along with your other MBA professors. So looking forward to it. And like I said, reach out to me should you need anything, and I will see you guys later.